welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you with us. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for tuning in. We love our new listeners. We welcome you, and we ask you to do a couple things. One, don't forget to subscribe, and two, give us some ratings. And we're not afraid to beg. I'm a well-dressed beggar today. I've got a shirt with a collar on, so we will beg for those ratings. So if you think we're doing a good job, give us a 5. We like those. For those returning to the show to listen, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Thanks to your listenership, we now have listeners in 32 countries across six continents. And if we could figure out a way to market to penguins and actually recharge their smartphones, we'd probably have listeners on Antarctica too. All right, so quick house cleaning to get things done out of the way. Don't forget to please stop by the show website, rexandrewshow.com. The reason why I always tell people to do this is there's everything there. You can listen to the episodes without being on the podcast platforms. We're on 23 of those. But more importantly, you can get a lot of information about our guests. Today, we got a great new guest that we're going to talk about and meet, but we're not going to have time to get to all her stuff. And so come to the website, read their bios, get connections, links to their stuff. And it's the same for all of ours. So all of the guests, previous, the current guest, and then those that are in the queue coming up. And we generally have between 20 to 30 guests that are on the horizon. So you can actually, take a look at who's coming up and see who's on the schedule. So fantastic. All right. So I'm excited about today's guest. It gets us into a subject I know very little about, but then again, that's probably the truth about almost every single person I interview. My mantra is I have too many interests for just one lifetime. But my biggest problem is around the corner, there's always another discovery. So we have another discovery here today we're going to share with you. So strap in and buckle up and let's go. Okay, so our guest today coming to us from the Midwest. We get people all over the globe, so we're here in the States today, and she does some really interesting things. She is a registered yoga instructor. Okay, that's one of the things that she does. Well, she's got quite a few lists here. She's a past life regression therapist, which I don't even know. That's a mouthful. So we're going to learn about that, understand some of that. Life coach. But in particular, what made me decide to, in addition to these things, have her on the show today is she's a clinical hypnotherapist. And so I'd like to welcome to the show, Stacia Aashna. Stacia, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Rex.
It's good to have you on the show today. We've had a little bit of effort to get here. I mean, it's been, probably 6 weeks since we last talked at least. So I'm thankful that you're with us today. All right. So as you know, anybody that listens in and follows the show, our show is all about people and the people's stories, the stories behind the success. I say this quite frequently: success does not fall out of the sky and hit people. We are usually where we are in our lives today is accumulation of where we've been. So today, what I'd like to do with you is go back in time and understand some of the influences and experience you've had to get you to where you are today. So it's a long list, but don't worry, I'll remind you. So we'd like to know, where were you born? Okay. Where did you grow up? Because sometimes that's different. I had a guest that was moved 63 times before her 15th birthday. So that's going to be different. Want to know about your family life a little bit. Siblings, did you have siblings that survived your harassment? If you have them, your parents, what they do and what they did do while you were growing up. So we kind of understand that climate and sort of the family culture around that. Any ethnic or traditional things that influenced your life when you might have had, different backgrounds that influenced that? What you did as a kid, with your spare time. So were you into sports or theater or computers or shoplifting or drama? It doesn't matter. We want to know about those things. And don't laugh about the shoplifting. I had a guest that by the time he was the age 15, he had stolen cars. And so hopefully we won't find any of that in your story here today. So take it away. Where were you born?
All right. So I grew up in Northern Indiana.
Okay.
I currently live in Chicago, so Chicago was kind of my stomping grounds growing up. It was an easy train ride, so this is pretty close to home.
Okay.
But I was born in Indiana, northern Indiana, and grew up in Indiana. Lived there until I was 18, and spent a lot of time in my adulthood moving around and living in different places. So, but lots of time in the Midwest.
Lots of time in the Midwest. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, how big of a town did you grow up in? Was it a small town? I used to live in Chicago and covered Indiana, so I would go down the tri-state and roll across there and going down to Indianapolis all the time. So,
Yeah.
how big of a town were you born, or did you live in?
It was a smaller town. I grew up right near South Bend, Indiana.
Okay.
So, most people think of that and recognize South Bend because the University of Notre Dame is there.
Sure.
So just kind of bordering South Bend.
Okay, fantastic. So, makeup of your family, do you have siblings?
I am the youngest of 5.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, really big family. We grew up in a really small house, so kind of always up in each other's business. And but very close with my siblings. Really like just definitely had all the full experience of being the youngest child of like all of the all the harassment came to me, but in like the most loving of ways usually. So I appreciate all of them for that. And there's quite an age difference between me and my oldest sibling. He's 15 years older than me. So
oh, wow,
that was always really fun. Yeah.
Now, what's the breakdown of kids, boys and girls in your family?
I have 3 brothers and a sister.
Okay, fantastic.
And now I have many, many nieces and nephews. Like my siblings have had a lot of children, but also cousins, kids call me Aunt Stacia, and I'm really fortunate in that regard.
Okay. So growing up, how did you spend your spare time? What were the things you had interest in?
Well, it's interesting because as you were kind of going through the questions beforehand, I thought that was such a cool question to ask because it really translates into the work that I do now.
Absolutely.
Had a really strong imagination as a child. So I like kind of developed this imaginary world around me as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I feel lucky that I grew up in a time where I didn't have I didn't have cell phones. We didn't have like computers, when I was a really small child. So I was able to just kind of really entertain myself through engaging my imagination. And that's a lot of actually the work that I do now is using imagination and imagery with my clients. So it's kind of cool how that worked out.
Okay.
And also just generally very creative, always involved in the arts, and then got interested in like kind of, these topics that, typically teenagers don't get into, like meditation and yoga at a pretty young age. And they just really fascinated me.
So what did your parents do when you were growing up?
Well, I mean, to be totally honest, I grew up in a fairly dysfunctional household.
Okay.
And that's a big piece of my story and why I do the work that I do is because it was really challenging. And so, as I said before, I grew up in a small house and the youngest of 5 kids. My parents divorced at a young age, so we went through a lot of challenges with that. My mother was a nurse and my father was a chemist. But lots of challenges throughout my childhood. And I think that going through those challenges is such a big part of my story because my story is that I was able to kind of heal and work through my own trauma from my childhood using a lot of the tools that I'm working with my clients with. So there's lots of really lovely memories and things from childhood, but there were a lot of challenges.
Well, you touched on something that's important for me with this. The reason I ask about this a lot is when we're being raised, we have an opportunity to be influenced by lots of things. Mm-hmm. I tend to see in the hundreds of people that I've interviewed sort of 2 different type of outcomes. One would be the loving and supporting. And so they were parents that helped rocket you off to things because it was a love and support type launch pad. Mm-hmm. And the opposite is stress, and struggle. interviewed a lady earlier today who was the victim of sexual assault from the age 3 till 7. And so a lot of times, because of the family, experience growing up, sometimes that's just a launching point to say, I don't want to be anything like that. Okay. Or those stresses motivated me. And so I always ask that question because, like I said, when I first, did the intro, people think success falls out of the sky, and it just doesn't happen that way and stuff. And so who we are today, it has a lot to do, extremely a lot to do, from between the ages 8 and 18, those experiences.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a very limited situation, and I was pretty determined, and I'm still determined to, really create my own course to be something that's truly authentic to me. And, that required me kind of facing that, as you said, like those are very formative years of your life, and those influences, the people that you have around you, especially your parents, really shape and influence your beliefs that you have about yourself, about the world, about other people. And then that influences how you engage and how you don't engage, like what you think that you're capable of is so strongly influenced by, what you grew up with. So if you grow up with a very limited experience with lots of challenges, people will tend to, just subconsciously create a similar sort of life for themselves, unless they kind of start to do some healing work there. And it totally makes sense, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. No, it's really interesting, and it's been a fun sort of outcropping as I've done all these interviews and created this show and getting the momentum. It's just amazing to see how those experiences have really molded who they are. And some of them are just, horrific. I have a few episodes that I'm just like, wow, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So, and especially there's two main really big ones there that impact. One is financial stress. Okay. So if your mom was single and, running around with 5 little kids, and you're battling between, if there's child support payments and stuff like that. And just, they're stressed with just raising 5 kids. I get that. I understand that 100%. And then the other one is just like the abuse side of things. So, was there verbal abuse or neglect or heavens to Betsy, not being something like physical abuse or sexual abuse. Those are all things that causes people to be motivated in different ways.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important to have I appreciate your opening the conversation up like this, because I think it's really important to talk about these things. A lot of people hold a lot of shame about these topics and they don't talk about them. I feel comfortable talking about it, especially because I know that if I have this conversation with you, maybe it helps to validate other people's experiences as well, just through hearing me talk about it. So yes, there was a background of abuse and trauma, and that created a lot of challenges for me. As a teenager, I struggled with depression, and I was suicidal, to the point where there was intervention staged to stop me from, actually going forth with that. So, it was that, and that was an effect of the trauma and the abuse. And it was a very difficult experience for me. But I am just so grateful that I somehow, I found some resources. I found some resources, some tools, some people who were able to come in and help support me and plant some seeds. And it took time to really work through that stuff. But I feel really just so grateful for where I've come from, how I've come out of that, I mean to say. So yeah, that was a big piece of my story.
Well, let's talk a little bit further about that just for a little bit, and then we'll go on to smart educational stuff. In high school, again, that's a really difficult time for a lot of people, especially females. There's the pressure from the peers, am I pretty? Am I thin? Am I fat? Or, all those kinds of things. Okay. That. And then also the other side of the fence as far as boys and those types of things. And so there's always a mix of self-confidence and am I the ugly duckling and those types of things. So what was your high school experience like?
So I think my inner dialogue as a high schooler was basically that I was completely worthless. And I had really that was probably like the core, most inner negative belief that I held about myself. And that affected everything about how I showed up in school. And what that looked like for me was a lot of, just, feeling insecure. But as a protective mechanism, I would isolate myself from my peers. Once I got a car as a teenager, I was skipping school all the time. I also went through a very difficult experience when I was 15, and a brother of mine, he passed away in a motorcycle accident. And so that, then that gave me the experience of going through, quite heartbreaking grief, and my whole family had to experience that. And, that on top of everything else that was going on, it was deeply challenging. And then of course, beyond that, yes, all of the other insecurities, but I think a lot of that kind of propelled me to grow up a lot more quickly than my peers. So I found myself feeling very like I couldn't relate to them, especially, I think this is a challenge for a lot of young people who experience that kind of loss at such a young age. Is it gives you and I think anybody at any age can relate to this, when you lose somebody close to you, it gives you a different awareness about life and just the impermanence of things. And I think that that truly shifted my consciousness and awareness about life in a way that was really a big deal for me as a teenager, where I just started really contemplating on, what are these superficial things that I was focused on, things like how I looked and, things that naturally teenage girls go through, those kind of faded away. And then all of a sudden I was like, that's pointless. And then I started, thinking about these heavy topics about life. So in some ways, that I can see now in hindsight how that did, it was very difficult, and I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that experience, not a child to have to go through that experience. But it also did kind of propel me on a path of really going into, deep into my own mind and trying to understand myself and understand others in the world. So in that sense, that was something that did offer that to me.
Well, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but my father was a highway patrolman as I was growing up, and he had a saying. He said, buy your son a motorcycle for his last birthday. And so never been a proponent of bikes. And when my kids were coming up, if anybody showed up to my house to pick up any of my kids on a bike, I would hand them car keys and say, you can take this, but you're not leaving with my kid on a bike. So
I hear you.
I'm not
and anybody who's listening, if you do ride, just like that, the difference that a helmet can make is so tremendous. So never, if you are going to ride, just always wear a helmet.
Yep, that's for sure. And then my dad always used to say too, his second slogan about bikes was, well, if you don't have anything to protect, then don't wear a helmet. So
yeah. Your dad was right.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's skip up a little bit. After high school, did you go off for some traditional education? What was the next step? Let's start to weave a little bit on the professional side to where you got up to where you are today.
Sure. So then, after I kind of moved out and was on my own, then that began the interesting time of my life of being out of the limitations of being in my family's house and being able to really explore and see who I am, which everybody goes through this experience, but it was a big deal for me. A really big deal for me coming out of an unhealthy space. And things really, they changed a lot very quickly. I did go to school in Indianapolis at IUPUI and studied psychology. Okay. I spent a lot of my early 20s also just having some really kind of radical experiences, going and living in an ashram. If you know what a yoga ashram is. Sure. And my job at the ashram was to be the housekeeping manager and clean all the temples and meditate for 6 hours a day. I did that at 21, which is quite an experience to have as a 21-year-old. I spent time living in a forest and working with indigenous people and learning about shamanism. And I was really drawn to a lot of different sort of a lot of different things in regards to healing and just those sorts of things. So did a lot of traveling. I kind of took throughout my 20s an unconventional path of like really trying a lot of different sort of fields out in terms of career. I started several businesses. Those were mostly around food. For a while, I was working as a vegetarian chef and helping different people who were writing cookbooks and editing. So I bounced around a lot. And during that time, I was also studying, kind of furthering my study into health and wellness and psychology. So always studying something. And in my early 20s, that's when I started also studying yoga and took many trainings in yoga. I did a 2-year program and studied vinyasa and restorative yoga and yogic philosophy. And that was a huge part of my healing journey was taking on a daily yoga practice, which when I say that, a lot of people think of yoga as just this physical exercise, but it encompasses so much more. It's breath work, it's meditation, it's concentration, it's so many things. So I really love the yoga practice. And then I found my niche in yoga, where I was working with victims of trauma, and found myself volunteering in a few different drop-in centers. So working with teenagers who were coming from abusive households, or many of them were homeless. And I think that was in so many ways very healing for me to work with that demographic, because I could really like relate to so many of their traumas. So loved doing the volunteer work. Can't wait to get back to that. Actually, COVID has obviously like changed a lot of my abilities to work in public spaces. So then as I kind of was continuing down this path of just kind of exploring and just like reading tons of books and just finding like different modalities that were so cool to work with, hypnosis came on my radar when I was probably I learned about hypnosis when I was 21 from my meditation teacher, and he was a master hypnotist. He was an engineer by trade, but he also was a master hypnotist. And I had no idea like that hypnosis could be used as a therapeutic modality. I really just thought, just like most people, that it was this stage hypnosis was what came to mind. And I would think about, like making somebody cluck like a chicken.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, this opened up my eyes to this whole world of being able to use this tool to actually help people heal, or not just heal, but do other things like, reach their goals, or, change habits, or, address fears and phobias, so many things. So I learned about that, and just I found a school in Arizona called the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, and took a 2-year program studying clinical hypnotherapy in my mid-20s, and just fell in love with the model. I started practicing that with clients, and receiving hypnosis as well was my first initiation into it, and just kind of fell in love with it. And then obviously also studied life coaching and got my certification in life coaching.
Okay. So,
I know that's a lot.
No. We'll have some stuff to unpack there.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately for most people, and I have a little bit of knowledge about this, but again, like I said at the beginning, I don't know that much about it. But unfortunately for a lot of people, they think hypnosis is all we talk about, the stage hypnosis, TikTok, watch the clock, buck like a chicken and stuff like that, which, that's interesting and maybe something silly in Las Vegas or some convention or something, but that's not really the real truth of hypnosis. Now, help me understand here if I'm right or wrong about this, but isn't hypnosis therapy mostly stuff for present and future? So you're not really going back too much on historical, like I'm dealing with issues from childhood, or where does hypnosis fit in the continuum when you're working with somebody, continuum of life?
Well, actually, a lot of it is focused on the past, because we're working with the subconscious mind. So, it's almost like we are all kind of walking around already in a state of hypnosis. We are all kind of, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, that we are the accumulation of our past experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that we have kind of repressed, and it's there, it's in your subconscious mind. And throughout our day, we're functioning from our subconscious mind for 50 to 80% of our day,
Sure.
where we're not even in a conscious focused state. So all that stuff that's stored in your subconscious mind is the accumulation of the past, right?
Okay.
So, if you have had trauma, or negative experiences, and they are stored in there and they're influencing your beliefs about yourself, that is shaping your behaviors. That's shaping your thoughts and creating behaviors, and that creates your life. So, it is definitely addressing the past.
Okay.
But then as far as the therapeutic piece, we are talking about the present and the future. And where do we want to go from here? What do we want? What kind of life do you want to have? And it is completely possible, to change your neural pathways. There's something called neuroplasticity, and you can, which basically, that term. So yeah, you can essentially rewire your mind. So if you feel like, you are just destined to always live your life in some state that you're living in that's not satisfying, and you're not happy in that place, I promise you that you can change those neural pathways and have a different sort of life.
Well, it's interesting you talk about that, because neuroplasticity has really evolved over the last 20 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. Before, people kind of thought, well, your brain is your brain, it's wired the way it is, not much we can do about that. But the truth is, now we understand, yes, you can rewire things. Yes, you can change behaviors.
Thank goodness.
So
I feel like that's a liberating thing.
No kidding. Everybody has some sort of trauma in their lives.
Yeah, so, everybody.
Yeah. So if I come to you today and I say, hey, I've got this particular issue, this or that, let's take this for example. What if I am absolutely paralyzed of success? I'm just worried about, I'm talented, I can do all these things, but I have a fear of success. Okay. How would you as a hypnotherapist help me using hypnosis rewire that type of thinking?
Well, there's a few different routes that we could take with that. What I'd really want to understand is that where you are feeling paralyzed of success. So that's just a part of you. First of all, I work with also a therapy modality called internal family systems. It's similar to like parts therapy. So I want my clients to understand that that is not the entirety of you. That's a piece of you. That's a part of you that is feeling paralyzed of success. So meaning like, you mean that you can't, like feeling like you can't achieve success?
Well, yes, possibly you can't achieve success, or sometimes somebody having like self-sabotaging behavior. Yeah. Okay. I just have somebody in mind that I'm thinking about who's this way, the brilliant person, but they haven't ever kind of crossed that bridge. And it's only because they have this doubt that they can truly be that successful. Yeah, so it's like this self-doubt, right? And so just thinking on this person's behalf is, how could you help a person like that is to say, hey, here's how I rewire that thinking, because his self-perception, again, I won't tell too much of the story because he might be listening and might tip things off, but he's a brilliantly smart guy, created one of the best products in his niche ever, but can't get out of his own way. And I think it's mostly a it's a subconscious thing.
Yeah. So I would, with that kind of client, what I would probably want to do is to investigate. We want to get to the source of where did that belief come from. I do a lot of age regression with people and going back into childhood and understanding. Sure. So we'd go back to like the earliest memories of when did that sort of belief take form. The first session I ever do with a client is a full interview of their life's history. I mean, kind of like what you've done with me here. And I want to understand, like, really, this is about developing a deep sense of self-awareness. Like that's what hypnosis really is deeply understanding yourself. So in that process, yes, like the first session is built on full interview. I want to understand all the family dynamic and how that might have influenced the person. And then we'll start doing some age regression work and maybe actually working with, finding that child self that maybe usually this stuff comes from childhood. There's
Right.
something in there that
Yes.
happened
Yep.
in
Yep.
childhood. So we want to go back and we kind of want to unburden that part of the person and bring that part that might still be trapped. That's usually, I would call this like an exiled part. That's an IFS language piece, exiled part of ourselves, and kind of bring that part that might still be kind of trapped in the past, in this old story, this old belief system, and bring it into the present.
Okay.
Okay. And that's sort of, we call that updating. So it's about bringing like that part of you into a state of consciousness. So kind of integrating it into your conscious present state. So I would probably do a combination of some IFS and hypnotherapy and inner child healing. So
Okay.
I kind of blend a lot of these modalities.
Sure. And I forgot to do this because we jumped into it because I'm so fascinated with the topic. How can people get a hold of you online? So could you give out website or social media links or those types of things so people can follow along? And then we'll come back to that later on.
Thank you. Yeah. So my website is my name. So it's www.staciaaashna.com. There's 3 A's in the middle of that. I do offer through my website on my Work With Me page, there's an application on that page for people who are maybe interested and want to receive a free 30-minute coaching call. And that's a great way for us to kind of see if this is the right fit for people who are interested. Okay. Because I offer different programs to work with people. So my website, and then my most active social media channel is Instagram, and it's just Stacia.Aashna. So I'm happy to connect through that medium too. If you want to send me a DM, I love connecting with people through Instagram.
Okay, so thank you for getting that so people can follow along. I know a lot of people don't. Okay, so so when you talk about this, going back and looking at the childhood and these experiences, influences, dramas, whatever, bringing them to the future, where does the hypnosis fit into this?
Sure. Well, so for example, if we're doing an age regression, I would, in order for somebody to really access those memories that are deep in the subconscious mind, that's where hypnosis is very helpful. Okay. So hypnosis brings you into an altered state of consciousness, which might sound intimidating, but it's just a really deeply relaxed place with a high state of concentration. Okay. So we kind of relax that conscious mind. And from there, we're more readily able to access the subconscious mind where those memories, those belief systems are stored. So we would use hypnosis to help bring the client into that state so that they can truly like go in and access and remember those, where did that belief originate? And that's where we would take somebody into a state of hypnosis, and then they can start to uncover and work with, where did that story start? Okay.
Well, a lot of listeners are going to be just like me. All right. So how do you get me to that state of hypnosis? Is it, because I've been one of the best classes I ever took, because I'm pretty much of an addict as far as self-improvement and those types of things, cool. Is I took a mindfulness class, a stress relief through mindfulness. And mindfulness, you basically, you're closing your eyes, you're focusing on your breathing, you're feeling, the parts of your body, you're listening for things you didn't stop and listen to before. So now you hear the air conditioner running, which you never paid attention to, and, dogs barking in the distance, planes flying over, whatever. How do you get to that state? So walk me through, and the rest of our listeners, how do you hypnotize me?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think it's really cool that you took a mindfulness class. I teach mindfulness as well, and I advocate it for all of us. It will really change your life. So hypnosis there's kind of 4 steps to it. The first stage is pre-induction, which is just developing a rapport with the client. There's just to kind of develop a relationship so that it's easier for a client to kind of trust and relax and, allow themselves to be guided. And I also want to really understand the language of my client. So I take a lot of notes on, how they express themselves, the words that they use, and a lot of that gets integrated into the session. Okay. And then we also want to really kind of pinpoint like what is the issue that we're looking to address. Okay. So I want to get really like hyper focused on what that is. And maybe in that process, we'll also create some suggestions, which are sort of like affirmations, like new beliefs that we want to state during the hypnosis session. And then the next part of it is the induction and deepening. So this is sort of the formal process. The formal hypnosis process begins here, and that's where the client will close their eyes. If you've ever it's sort of like meditation actually. I will be speaking to the client, obviously. So I will guide the client usually through a progressive relaxation. So that would be like really going through and relaxing all parts of the body. Sure. And we'll use therapeutic breathing during that stage as well, just to kind of really we're getting into a deep state of relaxation.
Okay.
And that takes some time to do that. We want to kind of move slow and really get into a nice relaxed state. And then we go into the therapeutic heart of the session. And there's always like a countdown that brings the client into this stage. And this is where the conscious mind is fully relaxed and the subconscious mind is more open. And during this time, there'll be a lot of therapeutic imagery that's used, depending on, how the client's mind works. We might use more metaphor and imagery work, or we might do more sort of direct suggestions, depending on, what really works best for the client. But it's at that point I'm guiding the client through imagery and suggestions to help them achieve whatever goal, or altering their mood or changing their behavior, whatever it is that we are trying to facilitate through that session.
Okay, so let me stop you there for a second. Mm-hmm. In that therapeutic session there, mm-hmm. at this point in time, have you already, in your prior, the regressive, analysis and stuff, have you already determined what the block or the issue is, the stress or whatever? Have you already done that? So when you're talking about the therapeutic session at this point in time, is this where you're actually doing the rewiring work?
Yes, exactly. So this is the rewiring portion. This therapeutic portion is that time. So we'll actually determine before the session starts what that is. What might be different in this stage of the session is if I'm doing inner child work with a client, I might actually have a dialogue back and forth with them while they're in the trance, and I'll have them actually speaking to maybe their child self or speaking from their child self. So sometimes that is also a piece of this part of the session, is there's actually a dialogue.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So you're uncovering it this time. Now, in that hypnotic state, do they ever remember these things? Do you have to take notes and then tell them later, or how does that work? Because I've never been hypnotized. So
yeah, it's super different from client to client. So some people do remember a full session. Others don't remember anything. And usually there's some, even for clients who do remember it, there's always some kind of wow, that was really weird. Sort of it's almost like a dreamy or hazy remembrance. It's not this they're not fully conscious throughout it, but sometimes they'll remember bits and pieces of it. So it's really unique to each individual.
Okay. Another question for you is then, mm-hmm. from your side of the table or the mic or whatever it happens to be these days, thanks to our wonderful, crazy world, mm-hmm. How do you know when they're in that trance state, that hypnotic trance state? So you've then sort of set their consciousness aside and you've gone in deeper. How do you know as a clinician when they're in that state?
That's a good question too. So, it's been a little bit tricky to translate over Zoom, but as long as I can get the client to kind of set up their camera so that I can see their body, specifically, I want to see the chest, and if I can see their arms and their face, that gives me some body cues. So, you see a pretty major physiological change, usually, depending on the state of the client when they come into the session. If they're coming in with a lot of anxiety, you'll notice that breathing will get really deep and slow. There's that's usually the biggest indicator, is the breath, just watching the client's breath and just kind of noticing, what's happening with the body. So that's generally the best indicator.
Yeah, because when I hear the word trans, the whole thing of being in that state, I always think of that crazy Jack Nicholson movie, The Shining, and the kids going rad drum, kind of thing. So I know that's nowhere near the same thing, but that's what runs across my mind. So,
well, most of the time we're walking around in a trance. Like that's the reality. And like
okay.
that's where hypnosis therapeutically can be really empowering is, if like, a really great example that I like to give just to kind of like make people feel more comfortable with the topic is think about if you're driving home from work and it's a drive that you've made like hundreds of times and you might not remember any of that drive. Like you remember getting in your car, but then you get home and you don't remember the drive. You've actually been just in your subconscious mind because that's one of the really cool things about the subconscious mind is we don't actually always have to be so consciously engaged in what we're doing because we remember so well through the subconscious mind how to do things. But that's in essence going into a light trance. You're not conscious, right? Like you get there and you don't remember that drive.
Exactly. No, I understand 100%. And I've even done that after moving. We lived in one house for about 12 years. And sometimes I would just get in the car and I'd been thinking about something. I ended up at the wrong house. And I'd be like, well, what am I, when I turned into that street, I'm like, I don't live here anymore. I got to go to the other one.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I think we all have those experiences. And I mean, then like the empowering piece of therapeutic hypnosis is that's a really great way that our subconscious mind functions is it keeps us functioning and doing things and we don't have to always be consciously engaged. But then there are things that might not be working so well for us. Like if we have things in the subconscious mind that are kind of creating behaviors that maybe aren't healthy or supportive that we want to change, that's where like we can start to see that, okay, maybe I don't always want to be in that trance state. Like, even just a belief like I said, like that I had as a teenager, I'm not worthless. I am worthless rather. That's like a trance in and of itself to go into. It's not conscious. It's a story. It's unconscious. And that influenced my whole life.
Okay. So another question that runs across my uneducated mind here. Is there any difference in the way women and men get to that state, that transit state? Because, women, their brains are all like connected, everything is, one problem over here is related to this problem over there kind of stuff. And where men sort of have like, they block it out better and they compartmentalize things. So is it harder or is there any difference in the sexes to get somebody in a hypnotic state?
I don't think that there's a difference in the sexes. I think the only difference that I would notice is people who are very logical and like very rational minded and kind of question a lot of things, they might find themselves like kind of blocking the hypnosis experience. Because there's another line I like to say, which is all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, meaning that, I'm not, as the hypnotherapist, I can't make you do something. Your subconscious mind will only allow you to go, as far as it will allow you to go. And so if you're somebody who is just very like logical and just questions the whole process, you might actually impede, your process and not allow yourself to really go very deep. So that's something that we can definitely work with and something that we kind of will discuss beforehand if that is an issue for somebody. But that's the only thing, which that can be an issue for both men and women.
Okay. I was just curious because we are wired differently. Women are. There's no question about that.
Sure.
Do you, and you were headed down this path. Have you ever run into somebody where they just could not allow you to guide them to that state of hypnosis? I mean, they're just so logical or they just so resistant that they just never get there?
So I have not so far. I'm trying to like think through all the years.
Well, then you must be really good.
I can tell if somebody's coming into my office and they are, if usually people who find me, first of all, they're looking for hypnosis and they're interested in it. So, in that regards, they've already have some sort of positive belief about the process, so they're open to it. And that's enough. Like we can work with that. And then, and then after that, it's really just about creating a rapport so that the client feels really comfortable, and that, you know, I explained to them that, you know, this is your process, and, you know, just, it's best if you allow yourself to really be open and receive what you can from this, which, you know, requires just really allowing yourself to relax and go there.
And then how do you bring people out?
There's just awakening. So there's awakening phase. So that's the last part. And so it's sort of a gentle process. We do a slow sort of another count, but it's like, you know, we're going to count from 10 to 1. And there's just a very gentle, slow process of counting and, again, engaging the breath. Because at this point, they're not really focused on the breathing so much throughout the session. We'll start to really like bring them back into their body. So start to feel and sense your body once again, and then they're out of trance.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because I was imagining like a pitcher of ice water or something.
No, I haven't done that yet. That would be it could be effective but traumatizing.
Okay, just you know, my dumb mind gonna kind of went
You're
there.
funny.
So I'm sure that this is unique as the people who come in, because they're dealing with different types of stresses. Okay. But is there a typical number of sessions that somebody needs to go through? I mean, if you've had this horrible lifestyle and you've had all these dramas and stuff, it may take a lot. And you know, but is there anything that's typical about this? Like a pattern, like 3, 4 sessions, 10 sessions? What's that look like?
It's usually 4 sessions is kind of what I suggest. And that's where I offer like intensive 4 sessions. So I will usually suggest, if somebody's coming to me, that we do 4 sessions, and we do them once a week for 4 weeks. And in between that, I create personalized hypnosis recordings that the client can actually listen to every single day. And so that seems to be really effective. And I have various programs that I run with clients for all sorts of different issues. But 4 sessions seems to be great. And then if there's more work to be done after that, we can also do that.
Okay, so if someone like me, batshit crazy, they might need 100 sessions.
No, I don't think we need 100 sessions. Maybe maybe half that.
Maybe half. Oh,
just playing.
So you're saying there's a hope, huh?
You're funny.
There's hope. Those Dumb and Dumber movies, you know. So you're saying there's a chance, right?
Yes.
Okay. What is the biggest, I mean, is there stress all over the place? We get that. And the more we learn about stress and its impact in life, is there a category that you see more often than others?
There is, absolutely. My main category that I see, and I work with a lot of things, but anxiety and all the ways that manifests in people's lives. So, but anxiety seems to be like that core issue for a lot of the things that I work with. And like, for example, I have a client who I recently worked with who suffered from insomnia for 18 years, and just like was getting on average 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night, had been into numerous sleep studies, was on, you too, maybe you need some hypnosis on medication.
We might be talking. Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So after just a few sessions of working together, and we're still working together and addressing other issues in this person's life, but she is now getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night without any medication, she was taking melatonin beforehand and I think other things. But it really, but we had also identified that it wasn't just a physiological issue, that there was a lot of anxiety that was disrupting her sleep and things that we really need to look at and address. And a lot of that was kind of that updating and bringing in some of that inner child healing, because we did, when we get to the core of a lot of the stuff, it's, there's a reason why this is happening.
Sure.
So that's one way that anxiety might manifest for a person. Another issue that I tend to work with is speech impediments. And that's a really interesting one that it just kind of happened, but I started attracting clients who are dealing with things like stutters that we've been able to heal and work through. And I mean, like literally fully clear up a stutter that somebody's had for their entire life.
Wow.
Through hypnosis. So
that's interesting.
I got to tell you, like, and I am actually, I used to be such a skeptical person. And I think I am still, like, in a healthy sense, a skeptical person.
Sure.
When I first started doing this work, I was amazed myself. Like, I was just like, I think that skeptical mind was still back there in the back of my mind thinking, this, is this really going to work? But then it was. I'm like, I can't believe how powerful this is.
Sure.
So it's been really cool for me too, to like, just see how powerful the work can be for my clients.
That's really interesting. The insomnia, boy, that's huge percentage of the population struggles with insomnia. It's terrible.
Well, and it's stress and anxiety. Yeah. So it's, and it's a terrible thing to live with. And it's a very empowering thing to then, I'm so sorry that anybody that's dealing with that, it's a terrible thing to live with. And it's a very empowering thing to heal it and to actually start sleeping and, realize that, I'm not a healer. That's not who I am. Sure, I help to facilitate a space of healing, and the client does that as well. And then that healing comes from that space.
Okay. Well, I'm going to pivot here for just a second. Because of the time, we're recording this in May of 21. So we're a year around from the big pandemic situation. So I'm going to ask you sort of a two type question. The first is obviously, how has pandemic impacted your business? Okay. And then the second is, have you seen a different type of stress or issues because of the pandemic out of clients? Okay. So, people being locked up or isolated or, walking around their house saying all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. So how has it impacted your business? Because most everybody's had to do things now from Zoom, and we're still coming out of that. So in-person stuff is not like it used to be. And then second, what type of stress or trauma have you seen because of the pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, this last year has just brought up so much for all of us, right? And it's been really dynamic for everyone. But for me and my business, it was interesting for me to translate and move everything online, including groups that I was leading and continue to lead, and then my one-on-one sessions. I had been doing that because I have clients all over the place. So I was aware of, like, I had experience working through the online space with clients. So I knew how to do that. But there was definitely, for me, a little bit of an emotional challenge of letting go of being able to see, especially my groups in person. That's such a lovely space to be able to connect. But I think I got to, over time, really appreciate, like, things like Zoom and my ability to be able to gather people together and connect and kind of regain that connection. I did notice an uptick in clients and a lot more people who were looking for help. And what I specifically noticed is, I think, a lot of people that I work with are, busy professionals who had things like now all of a sudden they're working from home and we don't have the same sorts of distractions that we always have, like being able to go into the office, being able to do things socially, being able to interact in the world, that all went away or greatly reduced. And what that meant for people is now they're having a lot more time with themselves, with their families, with their own minds, and things came to the surface a lot more for people. So, for people who maybe hadn't been so reflective on their lives, they were kind of forced into that space. And then obviously the consciousness of all this fear and stress just from, living through a pandemic, that was weighing on people. So it just like all compressed and made it very challenging for a lot of people. But through that, what I also found is, in that reflective space, so many of the people that came to me actually started doing really cool things, like really reevaluating their lives and thinking about, what is my purpose? What do I like? A lot of people came in just motivated to say, like, to really look at, like, what do I want my life to be? And open up to new possibilities and address those limiting belief systems. Like, they're evaluating, okay, is this really how I want to live my life? I want something more. And they're really thinking about it and engaged in that, and then ready to like take the steps to make changes. So that's been a really beautiful thing to be able to facilitate and help people with, for sure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time. I think 3, 4, 5 years, we'll look back at this, and there's going to be all kinds of things. And one of the people observing things that I've kind of watched, and I don't get political about, COVID and all those kinds of stuff, because, you can find as much pro or negative on any angle of this you can want if you go out on the internet. So, but I think what's been interesting is just to watch how people have responded to this. And it's about their level of experience and risk. Okay. So, the majority of the people in the United States live in cities, right? A very small percent live in farms. Well, if you have lived in a city and been an office worker, or, you worked in retail or something, you live in a bubble. It's not a high risk, it's not a high risk environment. But if you step out a little bit from the cities and you deal with somebody who might run a chainsaw all day, or a dangerous equipment or drilling equipment, stuff like that, they faced and have faced for their career health issues and risk of dying and accident and stuff where the office worker didn't. So what's interesting I saw is when you look at COVID, for such a huge percentage of the population, they now were facing the possibility of an uncertain death that they couldn't control.
That's really deep. Yeah.
This is like a chainsaw event for them.
Oh,
it's like, holy cow. You mean I could walk past somebody and get a virus that could kill me, and I have nothing, and there's no vaccine at the time. And so I think what's been interesting to watch people as we've seen things unfold during this is their response to COVID has a lot to do with what levels of risk they've ever had in their lives.
Very much true. Yeah, absolutely. So, for people who've maybe had like very easy, which everybody, like you said, everybody has trauma. So life is challenging for everybody. It's just sort of varying degrees of that. Right. So, and then some of us have like more, like heavy traumas where we have, really been through, very, very difficult experiences, and that, maybe that gives somebody a different sort of sense of themselves, and they take more risks because they're motivated to do that because they've been through so many challenges. But it definitely did like make a lot of people really face those sorts of deep fears that are associated with, like, okay, like there is a possibility that I could catch this virus, or, one of my loved ones could catch it and it could totally change my life forever.
Yeah. Or I could be locked in my apartment, in my house for years to come. I mean, there was so much uncertainty about the whole thing. And so I think it's been interesting. I think a lot of people of all ages certainly faced their mortality a lot more than they've had to in the past, and that scared the daylights out of people.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I've been preaching like compassion, love, and more like love and compassion over the last year to my clients, because I get people coming in, and sometimes I see them in their most vulnerable states, and I also notice like in those states, a lot of people find themselves being really hard on themselves because they've never experienced some of these things before. And they're like, they feel bad about like, why am I all of a sudden feeling depressed? And they feel bad about that. And I'm like, well, look at what you're going through. Look at what we're going through right now. And just kind of being just really like advocating for people to be more compassionate and gentle on themselves throughout this time. It was a really difficult year.
Yeah. Crazy. So one last angle of questions to ask you on the hypnosis. When people are going through their therapy, are there self-surface things that you ask them to do, sort of their homework or their self-care along the way as they're going through therapy? And then the second part of that question would be post-therapy. So I've been through the magical 4 sessions. We feel like we've gotten there. Is there self-care items that I can do to continue on this health path that you put them on?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I'm very committed to my clients and I really want them to have lasting change. I don't
Mhm.
want to put a band-aid on anything. And so I will give my clients plenty of homework. And if, I do offer hypnosis, but I do coaching as well. And I work with, like I said at the beginning of this, more modalities. So in any of the programs I'm doing with people, I give them work to do between sessions.
Okay.
And that's up to them, like whether they do that work, but I will give my hypnosis clients recordings that I suggest listening to once or twice a day to make that even more effective. What that helps to do is to like just continue that hypnotic process between sessions. So we're working on rewiring that subconscious mind, and we're not just, they're not just coming in once a week. They're doing it throughout the week over the course of those 4 weeks. And I'll also give my clients things like journal exercises and, whether it's appropriate, maybe like breath work or meditation. I kind of advocate for everybody to start some mindfulness practice,
Yes.
actually, especially if we're talking about post. I love that you appreciate mindfulness, by the way. I mean, there have been so many studies to support the benefits of mindfulness. It's amazing. It's amazing work. And so that's a great post therapy contract work, is to integrate a meditation practice, even if it's 5 minutes a day.
Well,
I
sure.
know so many people are so busy, they work a lot, they have families, and they can't even imagine trying to add something else to their plate. But literally 5 minutes a day, like just doing it consistently, if you can find 5 minutes, I know that might even sound like a lot sometimes to people, but the benefits of even those 5 minutes, they add up, and you start to feel better. You start to feel more objective with your own mind, and less reactive. So then your life starts to really change in a positive way.
So let me ask you this question then, and I 100% on mindfulness. What I learned is I was those busy guy run around, a million miles an hour. But when I took the class, I realized my effectiveness and my ability to focus after doing them made it so I could get more work done. So the 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes I spent on mindfulness made it so I could actually be more effective. So, but
That's really neat.
the next question that I would ask is, what are the logistics of your services? So are you one-on-one groups? Do you have self-service tools? How do people work with you?
So currently I'm offering one-on-one, and I do offer groups. They're kind of like, I just finished a group and I'm going to be starting another group in about a month. And those are focused on specific issues. So the one that we just ran, it was called the Full Body Freedom Course. And it was all about developing a healthy and loving relationship with your body, which was amazing. We did guided hypnosis, imagery work, lots of journaling, and the results from that course it was 6 weeks, were incredible. I had one client in the course who her body naturally released 12 pounds.
Wow.
She didn't go on any sort of diet. She was just doing the coursework, doing the journal prompts, doing the meditations, and doing the work in between. And she just started like really developing this different relationship with her body, and that influenced what she did with her body. So then all of a sudden she noticed herself wanting to exercise more naturally as a result of like feeling better about herself, finding like being in a more mindful state, and her eating habits changed. And so that was a really cool thing. There were all kinds of wonderful results from that. But anyways, to answer the question, one-on-one work. And my one-on-one work is I offer 3-month and 6-month coaching/hypnosis contracts. And then 4-week intensives for hypnosis, all kinds of issues that I work with. And then past life regression therapy. And those are one-on-one sessions.
Man, I might need some hypnosis to release my relationship with peanut butter. I just might have to do that. Just kidding.
Don't do that. Peanut butter is great.
I've often told people, I'm sorry, I don't have any more room in my life for any more relationships because I already have one with peanut butter. So
I appreciate that. I love peanut butter as well. And almond butter.
Oh, yeah, that's a new one too. So the last question I have for you, which I ask of all my guests, is you've been very transparent and learning about you and your craft. I'm intrigued. I'm going to be bugging you on quite a bit after this, but you know, in the Western cultures now, we have this concept called a bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to meet the bucket list guy, listen to episode number 60, Trav Bell. He's down in Australia. He's a hoot, man. What a great character. Anyway, people have a bucket list, things they want to do before they, you know, their time is up. But again, like anything else in life, there's an opposite of everything. So there's a list of things you never want to do. It rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but I won't say that because it's a family show. Okay. So while you're thinking of something that might be on your F it list, I always share a couple. Those who know, we could probably repeat these. Sardines. I'm not going to open up a tin and look at something that looks like it could be still swimming. Nope, I'm not eating that. Another one is I will never, ever, ever again do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. The whole concept of excessive heat, excessive humidity, excessive drumming, and excessive chanting in language I have no understanding of. It was a bad thing to never again. So what might be an item or two that's on your F it list?
Okay. Such an interesting question. I love it. My F it list. So I guess my first thing that came to mind was I was trying to think of like what makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I had a discussion with somebody about this recently. Things like roller coasters and jet skis where your body is like being
out of control. Yep.
Yeah. I hate them. I hate them. Like that is like, put me on a roller coaster and that's like my personal hell. Like it feels, I never liked them and it just feels like a torture chamber to me. And it's so funny as I'm saying that, because I recognize like how many people love that experience. And it's just so interesting how different we all are. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that is on the F it list for sure.
Okay. Anything else you can think of real quick?
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of things. I don't know. There's lots of things. That
Well, I'll tell you this. This will bug you for a little bit, and the next time someone uses that phrase, you'll remember our conversation today. So
I will. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being so transparent. I am really intrigued. Again, throw out your website there so people want to get a hold of you, and of course, you can always find out on our show site. So go ahead and give out your website and your Instagram, please.
Thank you. So my website is staciaaashna.com. And then my Instagram handle is just stacia.aashna.
Okay, fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a great educational time and entertaining. Again, I'm going to, like I said, be bugging you for follow-up information. So folks, we want to thank Stacia for coming on this evening and giving us some insight to this. What a great I don't know. In my view of health now, I think there's about 12 different angles from nutrition, diet, exercise, sleep, and those types of things. This one fits right in there. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it as well.
Okay, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. We want to thank you for tuning in. And please, again, stop by the show website to get more information on our guests. We only touch the tip of the iceberg when we talk to them. So please stop by. You have links to all of their stuff. So until next time, we want to thank you for tuning in, and we'll say the things that I say to everybody at the end of every episode. Be safe, but be bold, and make it a great day.